Good morning. If you missed it last night, we had a wonderful time. We had about 15 people gather at our house, and we spent about 2 hours talking about evolution. I had promised that beforehand. If you missed that, I do have some encouragement. We actually videotaped it. The video's not wonderful, but the sound is there. The microphones were on, and hopefully by late tonight, I'll have that on YouTube and probably a link onto Facebook. And by the way, if you miss any of the sermons in these various series, you can always go back. For example, if you miss something from Colossians, the entire series is sitting out there on the web. Just go to our website and look under sermons, so you'll be able to find that. I find it interesting, if you look at your outline for a minute, you're going to find the outline has 16 words in the entire outline. 3 of those words are the date. 2 of those words are my name. And I screwed up the outline. Because if you look, it says Exodus 32 and... Anyway, it should have said Genesis 37 and Exodus 32. It's been a long week. So the outline is screwed up. Don't worry, we'll get through it. I think you'll survive. By the way, I knew it. Somebody would have to pick that up and couldn't handle it with the dirt. Okay, I was going to get it later. One of the things you're going to notice today is we are going to do 2 mini messages, and I mean mini messages, really short. And the reason is normally we go deep into the Bible. We try to pull everything out of the Bible. Today, sometimes it's fun just to look at a character or characters in the Bible and take a look at some things that maybe we never saw before in some stories that we think we know. So we're going to look at Joseph and his brothers, and then we're going to look at Aaron and Moses, who were also brothers. To start with, you want to follow along, turn to Genesis 37. And in Genesis 37, these are Moses' brothers talking about, not Moses, sorry, Joseph's brothers talking about Joseph. In verse 4 where it says, "And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not peaceably speak to him." They were really ticked off. I mean, hate is a strong word. It's funny also because when I look at this, if you look at it, Joseph wasn't really the one doing anything and putting a division between them. It was really Jacob, the father. One of the things that I remember from when I was younger was that I was in a situation where I was in a church, and this was my fault. I was jealous of one of the other people in the church, primarily because he was being favored, I felt, unjustly over me, even where I had taught him how to do open-air preaching. And then when it came time to do it in front of everybody, they put him up instead of me. And it's like, wait, he's the guy that just learned it. I've been doing this for 2 years, and I just taught the guy how to do this. The problem was I was getting angry and jealous at him. That was wrong. It was really the person above him, and I found out later they had ulterior motives. But unfortunately, I did have a chance later on to apologize to this person. But it was my fault. But here again, look at it. It's not really Joseph doing it here. It's Jacob who's favoring one son over the others. Now, after they've established the fact that they hated Joseph, and they couldn't even speak to Joseph, they were so angry at him. If you look at verse 5, it says, "And Joseph dreamed a dream. He told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more." So hatred's not enough. Now we got to go to really hated Joseph. I think you see where this theme is going. Let's turn to verse 8. And it says, "And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words." So by the time you get done with this, these brothers are just furious at Joseph. They can't stand the sight of Joseph. If you look in verse 11, it says, "And his brethren envied him, and his father observed this." So they hated him more, they hated him even more, and they were envious of him as well. We come to verse 12, and Jacob decides to send Joseph out to check on his other brothers because they'd gone out to feed the sheep. I believe it was in Shechem, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was. And what happened is that they went from Shechem to another spot. And so Joseph went dutifully going and following his brothers to find the brothers, going to check on them and report back to his father. When Joseph starts coming up to his brothers, and again, a lot of this you're familiar with, but you're going to see some things, I'm pretty sure, that you haven't seen before. I was even surprised by some of it. If you get to verse 18, it says, "And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near to them, they conspired against him to slay him." Oh, that's nice. Good family. Can't stand the sight of him, so what are we going to do? We're going to kill him. And not only going to kill him, but think about it. They hated him so bad. It's bad enough when somebody says, "I'm going to kill somebody," and they kill him. It's even worse when you get a group that gets together and says, yeah, let's do it. So you had a whole group of them, all the brothers going to get together and they're going to kill Joseph. In verse 20 it says, "Come now therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into the pit, some pit, and we will say that some evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what has become of his dreams." So they're going to kill him, then they're going to throw him in a pit, and they're going to lie about it and say some beast killed him. We don't know what happened. Finally, a brother of sanity appears to appear. In verse 21, there's Reuben. Reuben is the one that decides, we shouldn't, no, don't kill him, that's ridiculous. It says, and Reuben heard it and he delivered out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. No, we're not going to kill Joseph. He's the one that says, shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness and lay no hand upon him. So what is he going to do? No, we're not going to kill him. We're going to throw him into a pit and let him die of starvation and die of thirst. Great guy. I love it. Reuben to the rescue. The whole idea was don't get blood on your hands, but kill him anyway. I'm going to skip ahead for a moment to Genesis 42:22. And I love reading the words of Reuben because this is so typical of some people. After all this is revealed and what's happened, what does Reuben say? And Reuben answered to them, his brothers, saying, Spoke I not unto you, saying, do not sin against the child, and you would not hear. Therefore, behold, his blood is required. He has the nerve to stand up there and say, I told you not to do it. Yet his solution was throw him in a pit and let him die. Reuben was the ultimate in hypocrisy. In verse 24, we finally get to the point where they decide they're actually going to kill him, and they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. You got to remember, this is a warm, hot climate. So what's going to happen? They decide that they throw him into the pit, they actually put him there, and they put him there with no water. So instead, they're going to be kind to him to allow him to die of an agonizing death of starvation and no water, as opposed to just killing him outright. I don't think they were really doing him any favors. Now, here's the verse that blows my mind. Verse 25. They've just taken their brother out to the pit. They've thrown him in the pit. Verse 25 says, and they sat down to eat bread. That's called sociopaths. They just threw it. It's been a long day. We had to kill our brother today. We had to throw him into the pit. What are you going to do? Now it's Miller time. These guys were it's almost like, I think of the Super Bowl thing. What'd you do today? I killed my brother. I threw him into a pit. Now what do you go? I'm going to Disney World. They sat down and they had dinner right next to him. It's almost unimaginable to think of that. Now, finally, we have another voice of supposed sanity coming to the group. Judah. Judah says unto them, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Let's turn a profit on this thing. I think Judah was Ferengi instead of being Jewish. They decided they were going to sell him. Verse 27, Judah says, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Now think about this. They're going to sell the brother into slavery. They're going to turn a profit on this. They're assuming he's going to die somewhere down the line. And the end of verse 27, and his brethren were content. Again, when I read this, everything is okay now. Everything's cool. We're killing our brother, but we're happy. When I read this, this is unimaginable, especially when you think about later what's going to happen here. If you look in verse 31, then it gets even worse. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid or a kid of the goats, and dipped the coat in blood. Why? So they could take the coat back to the father and hand the coat to the father and say, here's your dead kid's coat. Here's the blood all over it. Again, these guys were sociopaths in my mind. Somehow God still used them, but it's incredible. Now the contrast that I want to look at to start with is if we turn to Genesis chapter 45. In Genesis chapter 45, verse 3, Joseph finally has gotten to the point where he's going to reveal himself to his brothers. Now, in fairness to Joseph and the brothers, he did yank their chain a little bit before he told them who they were. Okay? If you go through the whole story about planting the goods in the one brother's bag and telling him to bring the other bag, I'm not going to go through it today, but he jerked them around a little bit, and they deserved it, okay? But in chapter 45, verse 3, it says, "And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. Does yet my father live? And his brothers could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence." Yeah, I bet they were troubled. How'd you like the guy that you sold off and wanted to cast into a pit, and everything else you did to him? Whoops. So what happens? He revealed himself to him. He didn't go after him. If you look into verse 4, he continues, "And Joseph said to his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." I mean, why did he even have to repeat that? Whom you sold into Egypt? It's like, Joseph, which Joseph we talking about here? Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry about that. I mean, the whole point here is that he shouldn't have to remind him, Joseph, the guy you sold. It's his brother. You sold him into slavery. You wanted to kill him. The amazing thing is in verse 5 when it says, "Therefore, be not grieved nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life." Can you imagine that someone had tried to kill you, thrown you into a pit? You now have risen to the point of the most powerful person in the world except for Pharaoh. He was second in command of the biggest nation in the world. They're finally delivered in your hands, and you say to them, "Look, relax, forget it, don't be afraid of me." That's amazing. I mean, think about the contrast between that and, yeah, we can turn a profit on this. And he's just what a contrast. Now, here's the thing that amazes me also out of all of this that we haven't talked about yet. These brothers we're talking about, Reuben and Judah and all the various brothers of Joseph. These brothers became 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel. The last two were the sons of Joseph. So the 12 tribes of Israel, which all of the chosen people came out of in the Old Testament, were these people who decided to sell off their brother and kill their brother. Were these hypocrites. As I've called them at times, I've wondered if they should be called the 12 sociopaths of Israel instead of the 12 tribes of Israel. This was not, the idea of sitting there and doing this and then just having no guilt, no thought, hey, let's have some bread, hey, we're all content. The point is, all of the chosen line came from this. And now you want to talk more miraculous? Judah, the guy who said, hey, let's turn a profit on Joseph. Judah is the one that all the kings came from. Judah is the one that David came from. And most importantly, Judah is the one that Jesus Christ came from and was born into the line of Judah. I find this amazing to look at what God did here. Because honestly, if I were God, and I'm not, and many people are thankful for that, if I were God, I would not have been just saying, oh, that's okay, we'll bring the king out of you. The fact is, God chose to use them anyway. The fact is, if you're sitting here today, God can use you. God can use me. It doesn't matter what's happened to you in your life or how you started your life. It's a matter of choosing to follow God and do what He wants. Although I do have a recommendation, please don't kill your siblings. If we could have the praise team come up, and we'll jump back into things. We're going to turn to one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, actually, Exodus 32. And the reason it's one of my favorite chapters is I really like irony and sarcasm, if you haven't picked that up already. And this chapter is perfect for that. One of the things that I remember, most of you know this already, but for about a year or more, I actually taught as an adjunct professor in 2 Bible colleges. And one of the things I remember was being absolutely startled by the fact that there was plagiarism going on in the schools. And I don't mean a little bit of plagiarism, I mean rampant plagiarism. And I don't mean they copied an idea, I mean they went to a website and cut and pasted half to 2/3 to 3/4 of their papers and things like that. So we're talking major plagiarism. But there are a couple of them that I will never forget. One of them was, when I would catch somebody in plagiarism, I actually took the time to do a separate column in Word. There's a comment section you could put into Word. And I would document where it came from and cut and paste to the website and have it right down the column next to it. So the entire paper, they could see, okay, word for word, write down, compare. There was no question. I mean, when I caught them in plagiarism, I had them nailed, dead to rights, okay? There's one of them that I remember, and I sent the email to her saying, I've just reported to the registrar that you plagiarized, and I've recorded a 0 for this. And, this was one where Literally 2/3, 3/4 of the paper was word for word from websites. Just stole it right off the idea. The thing I'll never forget is the email that I got from her. It was right after church, soon after church, and it was like, Linda, look at this, you're not going to believe this one, okay? The email started off with something like, I was having such a wonderful, blessed day in my church service, and you spoiled it. And I'm thinking to myself, what? You copied a paper, and in the end, she ended up basically blaming me for it. No, then she sent the wrong paper, then it kept going on and on and on. That person reminded me of what we're going to see here in Exodus 32. Because when you look at Aaron and look at what Aaron did, it's absolutely amazing. First off, if you look at it in verse 1, Moses was running late returning. He went up to the mountainside. God kept him up there longer than people wanted. And the people, it says, wanted new gods. It says, make us gods which shall go before us, for as this man Moses, talking about make us new gods. Now remember, this is right after God had led them out of Egypt, had brought the plagues, had turned the Nile to blood, had brought flies to the land but kept the Israelites' land protected, did all these things, did the Passover, all the firstborn, part of the Red Sea, and then suddenly, yeah, but what have you done for us lately? The ultimate case of that, just forgetting completely about what God had done. Now here's what's amazing to me. Aaron, the high priest of Israel, the man that all the other high priests came from down the line. Aaron in verse 2 says, and Aaron said to me, bring your earrings to me. Give me your gold earrings. In verse 4, it said Aaron personally received the gold. So he not only said, bring the earrings to me, he took the gold himself. He then made a molded calf. He carved it out of gold. And it even says he used a tool to do the carving. I mean, he was personally involved here. Aaron was sold out for the cause. He was personally involved. Then he built an altar before the calf. Like maybe he didn't know what he was doing. He builds an altar before the calf. Then he proclaimed a feast day in honor of the golden calf and in honor of the new gods. And by the way, in verse 26, we learn that feast was more than just a potluck dinner. It was a naked dancing feast with all kinds of stuff going on in that feast. That feast was probably more like an orgy. So this is what Aaron presided over. And then in verse 6, he made offerings to the calf. And it's kind of stupid also. You watch all this stuff happen, and then it's like, oh, well, he just made this out of gold. Now we'll make offerings to it. That was Aaron. Aaron was sold out for the cause. He was going to make this new calf. In verses 7 and 8, God knows what's going on up on the mountain. God confronts Moses. What's going on? And you know what God decides to do? He says, I'm going to consume the Israelites. Consume means I'm going to light them on fire and burn them out. Okay? At this point, the question becomes, if God kills all the Israelites, who's the chosen people? Remember the chosen people that God had picked? Well, you know what God told Moses? God told Moses, I'm going to make a new chosen people. I think it's verse 10 or 11. He says, I'm going to make a new chosen people, and they're all going to be from you. You're going to be the new father of the new chosen people, and they're all going to come from you. Moses didn't want this. But what happens is, in verse 21, Moses confronts Aaron. And Moses said to Aaron, what did this people unto thee that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? What are you doing, Aaron? You've been here. You've seen this. Now, here's where it gets beautiful. It's Aaron's response. In verse 22, Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Thou knowest the people, that they are set on mischief. Wasn't me. You know those people. You know the way they are. Don't get mad at me. You can't be mad at me for this one. In verse 23, he says, for they said unto me, make us gods. It wasn't me. They told me to do this. Which shall go before us. For as this Moses, the man, has brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wonder what has become of him. Now, if it's not bad enough with Aaron sitting there saying, wasn't me, I didn't do it. Verse 24 is one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. Listen to this. And I said to them, whosoever has any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me. Then I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. Bingo, bango, just popped on out. I don't know how it happened. We threw gold in there, and wow, golden calf comes walking out of the fire. He collected the gold. He made it. He built the altar. He proclaimed a feast day. He used the tool to carve it. He did all of this. You see why this reminds me of this little plagiarism story I was talking about beforehand. But the point is, he did all of these things, and then he sits down and said, just popped out, don't know how it happened. Now, one possibility, I don't believe this is true, but one possibility is it could have been a demonic act and something demonic actually came out of that fire. I don't think so. I hold that out as a slim possibility in Aaron's favor. I think Aaron was just lying through his teeth to Moses, period. And his whole thing about just popped out, don't know where it came from, not me, sorry, gay, don't know where it came from. Now here's where it gets interesting to me also. Back in verses 11 to 13, what did Moses do and what was Moses' response to all of this? Number 1, in 11 through 13, when God said, I'm going to make you the chosen people and make all these people come from you, Moses begged God, don't do this. Reminded him, look, you promised to Abraham, you promised to Isaac, you promised to Jacob. You can't do this. You can't take this away from them. He was begging for their lives. These are the people that were offending God and offending him, and he's sitting there begging for their lives. And in verse 32, the most incredible thing happens when he says, yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of the book which thou hast written. Moses is actually telling God, I will go to hell for their sin if you'll forgive them. That's incredible. Especially after, I got news for you, after hearing what Aaron said, that would not have been my response. I might have volunteered for Aaron to go to hell, but I wouldn't have volunteered for it. But that was Moses' response to this whole thing. I'll take their place. I'll take the penalty. I'll go to hell if you need me to. Blot me out of the book of life. That's incredible. What's also incredible is look at what happened with Aaron. All of the high priests ended up coming from Aaron. In addition to that, the Levites, we think about the Levitical priesthood, the Levites cared for the tabernacle. The tabernacle was the tent that was up before the temple was built. They cared for the tabernacle, but the Levites as a whole were not allowed in the most holy places of this tabernacle. It was only the sons of Aaron that were allowed there. It was only the special priests that were from the line of Aaron. Now, there were 2 exceptions to that who could not go there, and that was the 2 eldest sons of Aaron, because they did something bad also, and God struck them down and burned them up with fire. So again, it seemed to run in the family, passed down from the father. But still, God chose to use Aaron as the high priest. And I think he did it probably for Moses' sake. But the point is that, again, we've got a situation where God is using someone that, in my mind, should have been thrown away. I don't mean to stand in judgment of Aaron, but it's incredible what he did. What can we take from this? Number 1, are you a Moses and am I a Moses, or are we an Aaron? Number 1, are we going to be faithful in all circumstances no matter what's happening? Moses was faithful in these circumstances. He had a few flaws, but Moses was by and large faithful. Aaron, just reading through the Bible with Aaron is just an amazing character study of what not to do in a lot of cases, including when he and his wife Miriam rebelled against Moses. I think today of people like the Christians over in the Middle East being beheaded by ISIS, still being faithful right up to the end and not converting. Could we do that? That's not easy. I don't know what I hope that I would go along with it, but it's not easy under those circumstances. But even in our own life with the more mundane things. Last night we had a presentation on an evolution at my house. When you get confronted by someone who is a diehard evolutionist, who thinks they know what they're talking about, if nothing else, are you willing to stand up and say, I don't believe that. I believe God created the heavens and the earth. I believe God created man. You may not know any more than that, but simply to stand there and be willing to take the ridicule if necessary. Are we going to be faithful, or are we going to act like Aaron? Thing just popped out of here. Don't know where that came from. The other thing that comes up is, are we going to make excuses for evil, or are we going to admit what was wrong? There's another quick plagiarism story I want to tell you about by a different student. It is the only student that I ever allowed to do another paper in place of the one he turned in for plagiarism. That student, I confronted him in the same way. I sent him the dual column thing. He sent it out to him. And you know what the response I got from him was? I'm sorry, I did it. You're right, it was wrong. Not only that, he said, I ran out of time. I shouldn't have done it. I know it was wrong. If you give me a 0, I'll accept the 0 because I know I deserve it. If you can see your way to letting me do something else, I'd love to do another paper. And in that case, I knocked his grade down a good bit for it. But I did let him do another paper because he came out and he said, I did it. I was wrong. What was amazing about that paper that I haven't told you yet is he actually copied that paper from another person in the college, which I didn't even know about. Because I found out about it because it was copied from a sermon that was on the web. However, that sermon on the web had been copied word for word from something else written 2 years previously on the web. It was a plagiarism of a plagiarism of a plagiarism for that paper, word for word the whole way through. But he admitted it. Once he admitted it, it's like, okay, we got the point across. Now I can work with you. But the fact is, are we going to admit we're wrong, or are we going to make excuses? We're going to say, yes, I did it, I'm sorry, please help me. Or are we going to say, don't know where that thing came from, just popped out. Whether it's the paper or the golden calf, no matter what it is, no, that thing just appeared. The other lesson we can learn from this is, are we going to intercede on behalf of others? Moses took extraordinary steps for intercession. And I'm not just talking about prayer, I'm talking about actions as well. When we have to go and help someone else, are we ready to intercede on behalf of others? Now, as the praise team comes up here, that was just the cue, by the way. Real subtle there. I've learned that. As the praise team comes up, one thing I was going to say is that we are going to be having the dinner downstairs. I was going to say potluck, but that's not right. It's actually the youth that are grilling for us. They're actually grilling outside. We're actually eating inside so we can stay in the air conditioning, which I'm all in favor of. And in order to make things a little bit easier, when we do the dismissal in a few minutes here, I will go ahead and pray for the food also so that you can go straight down, and at that point, it's every man for himself. No, sorry, I didn't say that. At that point, go ahead, feel free to start your meals and enjoy it.